I learned how to tell it the right way. So let me introduce my friend Olivier Olsoin. Or maybe some of you know him as Holger Levsen, but whatever. He's I don't know, free software guy doing stuff. And he's going to talk to us about reproducible build. I will let you talk. It's better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chrome is open. Just ask me if you want to go now, and we say it after.
Come on.
Just.
Thank you for this introduction. Good morning, everyone. This talk is a bit or very much in memory of Lunar. I will not say much more now, because I will say a lot of Lunar in the talk later. It's very sad. I'm very sad. Anyhow, I think you get this. This talk is also a bit part of many things I've said before. I've worked on reproducible builds for 10 years, and this talk is not about my work, but the work about many people. There are many there. If you have contributed and are not on this list, please come to me after the talk. Who of you has heard about reproducible builds? I guess many people by now. It's 10 years old. And I don't want to single out the people who haven't. So anyhow, who contributed? Yay, thank you. So, but who knows that reproducible builds is around for 30 years? But that's gone. And SBOM is something we did already in 2014, basically. But I get to that. The source code of free software is available, but most people install binaries, and no one knows if they really correspond. And as a result, there are various classes of supply chain attacks. And we have a definition: when is the build reproducible? The build is reproducible is given the same source, build environment, and build instructions. Any party can recreate bit-by-bit identical copies of all specified artifacts. You heard that already. And this is from Lunar's talk from 2014. It's basically the same, so it's 10 years old. And our mission is to enable anyone to independently verify that a given source produces bit-by-bit identical results. And reproducible builds are an important building block to make supply chains more secure, nothing less. But reproducible builds doesn't make any software more secure by itself, because the bugs are just reproducible. And so this year we finally came around to have this mission, which most people probably say, what does that even mean? Maybe most people in the room not, but if you ask anyone else, they were like, what? So now we have a new slogan: enabling supply chain security. Everybody gets that, right? So, reproducible builds. But by now, reproducible builds have been widely understood. We have the definition, we have gave many talks, we have resources. The White House, the old White House, or the got it also as well. They demand SBOMs now, and by that, and they do recommend reproducible builds. So how did we get there? And I'm a bit repeating this also because of memory of Lunar. First it seems it might not be Lunar, but Money and Snowden. Why Money? Bitcoin was the first big software reproducible in 2011. And because they were afraid that if there would be a backdoor Bitcoin client, they could be made responsible, the developers, and they wanted to prove that they distribute the right thing. And Snowden, well, after Snowden, Tor browser was made reproducible by Mike Perry and Fred Schön, and that's Firefox, one of the biggest software in the world. So since then it's clear it's a working concept, it can be done. But that's not the real story. In reality, it took a lot of work from many people. It was way more than these two projects. So Lunar hosted a brainstorming meeting at DebConf 13. Who in the room was here? A few people. I wasn't there, so I'm not raising my hand. Good. and another one at DebConf 14. And then Luna gave a talk at FOSDEM 2014, and it's above. And there were the first patches for dpackage and for build info files, which are SBOM files, in 2014. In 2016, the dpackage maintainer put them into dpackage finally. And in September 2014, I started systematic builds of Debian packages twice. First I did 100 packages and then all of them. And Mike Perry and Session gave a presentation at Congress in December 2014 showing our graphs. That was quite wow to see them. This is from this talk at CCC 2014. And yeah, we think that software development is a minimum activity. Why should somebody not trust us? And I'm the developer, I'm a trustworthy person. But they are big incentive to attack developers and supply chains. And there's very hard to detect compromises. And because all the build machines, the development machines, might be secure, but you cannot really secure computers if you run lots of untrusted stuff on them. And also, if you can attack these computers, you get a lot of benefit from it. If you take the Debian build Ds, or if you take your developer machine, compromise the source code, and there's attackers who have lots of resources. And also 10 years ago, there was this bug in SSH, which has this one small difference, and that difference is a bit in 500 kilobytes. And you will not see it. No one will see it. Very hard to spot. And they also made a proof of concept of a Linux kernel module which modified the source, that if the compiler works with it, it's differently than if you look at it with an editor. So, and this was the graph back then. Cannot be, the talk was 2014 anyhow. So 2015, Luna and I gave a talk inviting the free software world at large. Before it was just the Debian project, and since then other projects have joined. And at CCC Camp, Luna gave a presentation, which I think is still one of the best, showing different classes of problems. Like he showed 40 issues or something. And we had the first summit in Athens, where we met with 25 people, I think, or something from 15 projects, and discussed reproducible builds for the first time as a dedicated topic of a conference. And the source date epoch specification we wrote back then. And Luna wrote debindiv. Who of you remembers debindiv? Some people. It's diffoscope now, and diffoscope has now over 80 contributors. So the common reason for unreproducibleness is timestamps, and build paths. And timestamps we mostly address with source date epoch, and build paths by now we just address by rebuilding in the same path. The build path is part of the environment, and fine. And then there are various other issues, like hundreds. And we have a Git repository where we categorize these issues, and we have 400 different types there. And again, Luna's talk from camp is very good there, and our documentation should also cover this. And in our documentation, there's an unreproducible package, which shows many problems, because it's way easier to show the problems than if everything is right, then everything is right. Source date epoch describes the time of the last modification of the source in seconds since the unique epoch, because build timestamps are largely meaningless if the rest is identical. And that's supported by a lot of software today, like hundreds or most compilers. If source date epoch is set, then the timestamps are replaced with source date epoch. And the specification is also very old, has been updated once, and since then it's working. So that I think is really nice. And diffoscope, who has used diffoscope Probably many. Wow, yes. Diffoscope tries to go to the bottom of what makes files or directories different. It will recursively unpack archives of many kinds and transform various binary formats into more human-readable form to compare them. And there's try-diffoscope.org, where you can just upload 2 artifacts and you don't have to install it. If you install it with recommends enabled, it will probably install 3 gigabytes of software because it supports many, many formats. It has text and HTML output and JSON output, but it really supports any file format you can imagine. In the beginning, it was to Debian packages, but you can now give it to CD images, to, I know lawyers who compare PDFs. Like when a new law is made, they compare the PDFs with diffoscope. And there's a fallback on hex dump and fuzzy matching also, and much more. And in case you haven't seen it, it looks like this, side by side, and then there's the differences nicely displayed. And in 2017, we made this logo, I think. And we made these summits, like basically every year one, a bit interrupted by Corona. And we want to make another event this year. The location is unclear, so I hid it, no. So if you know a venue suitable for us, please talk to me. Maybe Toulouse, maybe Marseille. There are many projects at the summit, like basically all Linux distros. NetBSD, FreeBSD was there, Coreboot, whatever. Apache, Maven. It's really nice to see that there are many communities by now. NetBSD has made now, is reproducible on basically all architectures NetBSD supports, which is like 50 or something. And we have funding. We started, in the beginning we were funded by the core infrastructure, by the civil core. No, we were. No, that was something. That was the heartbeat thing. Something. It doesn't matter. We were funded in the beginning by something from the Linux Foundation, but since 2018 we were funded by Software Freedom Conservancy. Up until this month it was Chris Lamb, Mattia Rizzolo, and Vagrant and myself. And now since 1st of November it's also KPC YRD. KPC YRD we'll mention later. You can just remember KP, it's way easier. And we need funding for community work, fixing upstream, developing software, doing the summit. So thanks to the sponsors. It's currently CIP, the Civil Infrastructure Platform, OTF and STF. And now to Debian, which is probably why you are here mostly. So that we have some parts of Debian are already reproducible today. We have reproducible Docker images. They are bit by bit identical, force-stable, just like Tails. We have reproducible live images, which is really, really nice. And individual packages are reproducible, which is nice for developing if you just do a small change and want to see whatever deb helper to change from deb helper 12 to 13, does it change anything else? You can do this for most of packages. So our graph has become a bit longer now, and you see in the on the right there, this gain is when we stop varying the build path. That gave us 10% more or something. For Trixie, it looks a bit boring. Trixie was always very reproducible. Trixie is awesome. And we filed a lot of reproducible related bugs. Most patches were applied. If you want to do NMUs, there are plenty of NMUs you can do. And we file a lot of bugs. Many of them are files to build from source bugs, because we constantly rebuild. And then finally, in July this year, Snapshot got fixed. And that was blocking us for the last 2 years when everything was in place, but we couldn't rebuild Debian, because for rebuild we need Snapshot, Because what we did before were just rebuilding twice at the same time, at the same day, and not comparing against Debian, just doing CI. And now we finally can do it. Huge thanks to Linus Nordberg and DSA who made it. But there's still some issues. In the last 2 years, many snapshots were not imported because the old machine was too slow. So it's normally snapshots 4 times a day imports a snapshot. But if the importer runs for more than 6 hours, then snapshots are missing. And access was also severely throttled. This has been mostly fixed. There's still some stuff, but in general, the service is reliable again and usable. And that is, I'm very happy about this. And so since last year, our CI results are included in the output of testing migration as an info. It doesn't give you penalty or anything. It just tells you, oh, and by the way, your package is reproducible or not. And now that snapshot is fixed, we can do rebuilds where the build is compared against what Debian is distributing on ftp.d.org. And soon we can use this for the testing migration. And then last month, or September, the bootsnap and deb rebuild were fixed for good because they were written when snapshot was very unreliable, and now that snapshot is reliable, we tested a bit more. And deb rebuild is the tool you want to use, and deb rebuild uses the bootsnap to recreate the exact same environment as the package was built in. And last month, work on reproduce Debian net began. I will get to this in a second. So how to use deb rebuild to rebuild a package? Well, you download a build info file and you run deb rebuild. That's it.
Easy.
That's Josh's work mostly. And then rebuilder.d comes into play. Rebuilder.d has support for rebuilding Arch, Debian, and Tails. It's split into a rebuilder.d, which orchestrates the work, a worker or several workers, and a control tool. And for Arch Linux, several instances exist, like 8 or something. It's written in Rust by kpcyRd, and it's available at github.com kpcyRd/rebuilder.d. Totally easy URL. And the installation is pretty simple, sudo make install, and soon with apt-get installed, like rebuilder.d common is in Debian unstable already. It's Rust, and so I'm packaging it. Or KP is packaging it, and I'm sponsoring the uploads rather. So if you go reproduce Debian net, is there with a working SSL certificate since last week, I think. It's one rebuilder.d instance, and it's finally rebuilding and comparing against what we distribute on ftp.d.org. And the setup is still at its infancy. Like there's only 2 workers on a host. You can have workers on several hosts. That's not happening. But it's doing what it's doing. And at the moment, also, rebuilder.d has not support for several architectures, or we don't know whether it's working. It's unclear. I got access to RISC-64 hardware now, where I want to set up a similar instance, but they will not be talking. You can set up an instance, the document. Jochen, have you set up an instance for yourself?
No, I guess yes.
Not, yeah. Yeah, but it's rather easy. And then there is the rebuilder.d website. So this is from Arch Linux. I'm not sure whether you can read this, but it shows Arch has 6 unknown, 1,400 bad packages and 12,000 good, and it lists the bad packages and the logs. It's a different view, and I plan to set this up for reproduce Debian net this month. So the difference between theory and practice is 63% currently. We are 96 in theory and 33% reproducible in practice. Yay! Like a month ago, in the beginning we were at 23% or even 20, and I was a bit unhappy, but Elbrus was like, fine, we can use this for testing migration. If a package is reproducible and regresses, bad. This is 20%. So why is the difference so large currently? As I said, many snapshots specified in the build info were missing, and that this at the moment affects maybe 20% of the archive. I haven't done real numbers, but it's a guesstimate. And Snapshot also still has some issues, including sometimes returning broken files, which then are cached by us, but we are working on this. And fake root is not listed in build info files if it was installed, and this affects some packages as well. Jochen made a workaround for this, and there's probably other reasons. I said it's just 4 weeks, and the last 4 weeks were for me a bit heavy, so not. But in the last 24 hours, 60% of the packages we tested were reproducible. So we got a lot better than 33% by now. That I said already, in 6 weeks we came from 23 to 33%. So how to reach 100% in practice? 100% is a political decision and nothing technical, in my opinion. We need to change Debian policy to get to 100%. We can work around by whitelist, because if the kernel or whatever is not reproducible and we want it, then okay, we'll ship it. But the goal is still 100%, and whitelists are just the means to achieve that. So policy in 2017, policy was changed. Packages should build reproducible. So I hope in 2025 we get to must not regress. Also that new packages should by now must build reproducible. We can always have exceptions, but that should be the default. And then in 2027, all packages must build reproducible. And the way to change policy is to make it work first, and that is by the release team. When they enforce it with the testing migration, that becomes reality, and then we can change policy. And this is the path to 100%. I didn't change the numbers. These on the reproducible numbers are from the CI results, but in principle it's still the same. We get there, we have whatever between 300 or 500 unreproducible packages in Trixie, and we get slower by not allowing regressions, not allowing new packages, and eventually in Forky plus 2, which is still some years ahead, we might get to 0%. Whether it's Forky plus 2 or Forky plus 3, I don't care, but I want to get to 100%. So in theory, we are done. In practice, we have shown that it can be done in theory. Now we need to close that gap. For Debian, we need to set up more rebuilder-D instances for all architectures. Like if you have hardware, please talk to me. We want all the weird, all the interesting architectures as well. And then there's still 4 or 5% software which needs to get fixed. And 1% for Debian is 300 softwares. So, as a summary, globally, many projects aim and support for reproducible builds. This is a huge success. Also, yes, at this DebConf, there was rumor Ubuntu might be finally working on it. I'm not saying more. We need to finish those, and I had that. And we need to have this project-level consensus to really do this, to say, if the package is not reproducible, the time is over, fix it or get out. And this is again 10 years old, which basically has the same conclusion as I have now. Thank you. Thank all contributors. Is there time for questions?
We have 5 minutes for question. Who wants to ask something?
Hello?
Sorry, I missed the beginning. Is there a way for users to specify they want to install only reproducible packages? That would be maybe a good policy to add something like that?
Nope. What we because then you will get used to, this package is unreproducible, ignore. We want just to be the default reproducible.
Another question, I think someone.
Hi. At first, thank you for all your work on this. It is really great stuff. And in principle, if Ebo said we can prevent testing migration, we have the test suites which need to pass, and the reproducible builds could be based on the same technique. So I guess it's more or less switching a trigger to implement this. Is this correct?
I don't know the details how the testing migration is done.
But maybe we do it with the auto package tests.
Yeah,
and,
it's just.
And so if we add another test, then it should be technically easy to prevent the testing migration, right?
Yes, there's also the problem of delays. So
okay.
the packages needs to be built, then it needs to be built a second time, and then the results can be taken into consideration. We need to work this out in the future. How this will work exactly, we'll see. For quick building packages is easier, but sometimes packages build a long time. I think it will at first probably not be penalties, but rather bonuses, but I don't know.
Okay. Second thing, I can only encourage if you get a bug report with patch to make a reproducible build. I try to follow this in 24 hours if possible. So I can only recommend to do this to everybody. And another thing is we have Salsa CI, which is also checking reproducible tests. I personally would consider it a good thing if the default for package installer would be switch on Salsa CI, then users become aware of this problem. What do you think about this?
Well, of course I like it.
Yeah.
But it doubles the time, or it doubles the build time, so it has some costs, and
it's not environment clean. Yeah,
and there's also, like, we have repo test, and repo test will also do many variations to find out why something is unreproducible and can take even longer. I'm not sure whether it needs to be enabled on all. Maybe yes, if we have more hardware.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
In principle,
Thank you, Andreas.
I want more tests and test everything, but tests have a cost.
There's still more time for another question. And someone ask. Yeah. Come on.
Thank you. I had a question. How do you tackle the problem of signed binaries?
Pardon?
For example, how do you, if you want to reproduce the kernel, do you exclude the signed version of the kernel with secure boots?
We replay the signatures.
But the user can't do it?
If there's signing is a problem there, and also checking signatures, because signatures expire. But for the signing part, if you create the same binaries, then you can reapply the signature, okay. But that needs some more infrastructure. So that the kernel package is difficult now with the signed kernel modules.
Okay.
How much more time do we have?
Someone might have been wrong before, but I think we have still some time for a few questions, so it's your time now.
I have two questions. The first one is when you rebuild using the build info part, you use all the Debian infrastructure, right? And is it possible to fall back to software heritage, for example? Instead of fetching source code from Debian, you fetch source code from software heritage. Is it possible to have the hash of software heritage inside the build info? I don't know if it made it clear.
Not so much, but so far we need to have the exact same source to get the exact same binaries, and also the exact same dependencies installed. In practice, maybe slightly different dependency version might work, but it's unclear, so we recommend to just use the same version. And usually, do you mean that the same source in Debian and Red Hat creates the same binaries?
No, I mean, in Debian, for example, you have the copy of the source code. So, for example, you have the hash of the source code. So, because you have this hash, you have the exact same in software heritage, because software heritage ingests everything. So if you know this hash, you can say software heritage, give me the source code of this hash, and you get this exact same source code.
Well, if it's the same hash, then it's the same source code.
Yeah.
So whether you get it from software heritage, from Debian, or from someone on the street, doesn't matter, it's the same.
Yeah, but the point is, if for example, Debian shut down for whatever reason, and you have this build info, you are not able to rebuild from source because it cannot fall back to another source mirror.
Nicolas wants to reply, I think.
Nicolas, who knows maybe something about software heritage?
I guess I'm going to try to maybe clarify your question. What if snapshot.debian.org burns completely?
Oh, yes, that is out.
Thank you.
That is very bad. So there is one mirror. But what if both mirrors burn? Also, if the one mirror burns and you have the second mirror and we create a copy from the second mirror to a new mirror, because it's 140 terabytes, so copying these 140 terabytes will take a week. So if within that week the second mirror burns, all the data is gone. So please create a mirror of snapshot.debian.org.
Now?
Mañana. No, but it's seriously, it's 140 terabyte data. I think, does Software Heritage want to do it? Because 140 terabyte by now is like 6 disks with 20 terabytes, so it's not that big anymore. Everybody should have a snapshot mirror at home. Christmas present for your loved ones. Seriously, that's DSA realm. DSA is working on having mirrors of snapshot, they know, but it needs hardware again, because you need a bit more than those disk space. But yes, please do mirror snapshot.
I think we still have a few minutes. Yeah, sure. Anybody wants to ask a question to Holger? Or, as I said, Olivier, Olsoin, something?
So my second question is, we could imagine to have a content address system and maybe share the build between all the reproducible build project, because
the build environment.
Because we are
the sources are the same, but the build environments are different. Even if you build with Ubuntu or Debian, there's different build environments, so the same source will probably create different binaries. There are cases where it's not the case, like GNU Mesh compiler creates the binary is the same in Debian as the upstream released one, so there are ways to achieve that for smaller projects, but not for bigger software bases.
Thank you. I can see you want to ask something. Yeah?
I'll be here the next 2 days. I'm happy to talk about this anytime.
Thank you very much.